are all winners of some of the most highly competitive scholarships awarded by very prestigious institutions, and they are all here to speak from experience on how to land a highly competitive scholarship. Viewers and listeners joining us from different parts of the world, thank you and welcome to our very first and special edition of the David Chikwaza Global South Indaba. Petronella, welcome to the Indaba. Could you just reflect on the importance of pre-application research?
I would say that the biggest mistake that people make when it comes to applications is generalizations. So you hear someone saying, I've made a lot of applications and they're not coming back. And then they're literally just taking one template and submitting it to different institutions. And that just works against you in the long run. So before I would rather you make one quality application than you make 10 bad ones. So the pre-application process research is very important because it makes it clear to you what is expected, what you're supposed to do, and it makes you avoid generalizations. So it gives you the chance to have one good application instead of having loads that are never accepted.
Thank you so much for that, Petronella. Eric, welcome to the Indaba.
Thank you very much, David.
Could you just share with us, let's say for instance, I'm applying for a scholarship. What is the scholarship committee expecting to hear, and how am I supposed to package it?
Well, for me, one of the most important things the scholarship committee wants to know, to hear, is whether you've thought about the whole cycle from start to finish. In other words, whether you've begun with the end in mind. You might have, done so much, but how do you package that so it reflects what you've achieved and what you plan to achieve in the future? So it's packaging that and actually selling that. That's what the scholarship committee really wants to get at, basically.
Thank you so much, Eric, for that. I'm going to move on to Lola. Lola, welcome to the Indaba.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Well, Lola, could you just share with us some of the unknown scholarship opportunities in the US?
Yes. So I would say for most people applying to a PhD program in the US, you'd typically be funded through your department, through an assistantship that might involve a teaching assistantship, a teaching officer position where you're the individual lecturer, or a research assistantship. But there are some other, particularly international scholarships available. For instance, the American Association for University Women has very competitive scholarships that are equivalent to about what you'd get from a graduate assistantship. Similarly, PEO has one. Schlumberger has a Faculty for the Future scholarship, which is a similar, maybe slightly less than $30,000 per annum. So it's just about, I believe Mariam Chamberlain also has one. So it's just about searching, but they are available if you want to go a route outside from your department funding.
Thank you so much, Lola. Cephas, welcome to the Indaba.
Thank you, David.
Cephas, scholarship applications require a lot of long suffering. Could you just highlight for us the importance of long suffering, patience, and hard work?
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with you that there's a bit of perseverance required on the application process. Part of the reason to it is because the process itself can be overwhelming, especially I'm speaking from the Rhodes Scholarship myself, where you are required to hand in a lot of documentation. And part of the documentation is from recommendations from your school supervisors or work supervisors. So putting all those together can be overwhelming because you are trying to cooperate with a lot of individual parties. Part of how I succeeded to maneuver around that was to let go of the earliest possible whenever maybe one recommender seemed not to be able to pass in my recommendations in time, and to persevere throughout the process. Like there are definitely going to come a lot of drawbacks, things that you don't expect to happen will definitely happen, but it's best to drop whatever is failing and move on to whatever is succeeding.
Thank you so much for that, Cephas. The next question that I'm going to ask, I'm going to direct it to Petronella. Well, it is customary for us that when we are having a program such as this, that we when we advertise, we invite the audience to submit some questions, and we do have some questions. And the question that I'm going to direct to Petronella is, the University of Oxford was ranked 2nd in the UK and 10th in the world 2023 overall rankings. What's your story, Petronella? What do you consider to have been critical things you did that contributed to you landing a scholarship with such a prestigious university?
Okay, if I had a nickel each time someone asked me that question, I would be a millionaire by now. But I would say, when it comes to getting scholarships, let's start with the basics. Excel. Like it's guys, this is where the basics apply. Get good grades, be a good student. And so I would say the first important thing is excel. Just make sure that you have a good track record. And if you're in your first year, remember those grades are going to show up on your final transcript. So just do good, pass, have good grades, and just make sure that you are a student of excellence. And I think the second thing is that don't put your eggs in one basket. So what actually worked in my favor, particularly with the University of Oxford, is I applied for 2 separate programs and I was offered both. And the challenge was getting a scholarship. And one of the reasons why I got the scholarship is because I had been offered the 2 programs. So it's quite easy to get a place. It's quite hard to get a scholarship. So like those competitive urges where they're like, okay, this person was offered 2 programs, she must really be good at what she does. So just that thing of diversify and your applications and don't put them all in one basket. And the third thing is references. And when it comes to references, there are 2 things that you have to remember. The first one is your referee has to be reputable. So it has to be someone, don't pick that lecturer because they're your friend and because you hang out over lunch. Pick someone who actually has some academic works, or someone who is actually like reputable, that they're known in the academic field. It may not necessarily be that they're known where you want to apply, but someone can actually see a track record of them if they do search for them. And secondly, choose a referee who actually supports you, because half-hearted compliments are not going to work for you. And those may be like, oh, she is a good person. Like they're not looking for whether I'm a good person, or they're looking at my skills and stuff like that. So you need someone who actually believes in you, someone who can actually point out your strengths, someone who actually roots for you, and someone who actually believes in you. So your referee has to be reputable, and they actually have to believe in you to write a convincing reference letter. Because I remember one of the things that my supervisor in Oxford did say was, one of my references from the University of Zimbabwe was powerful. So because my lecturer believed in me enough to actually do that, it worked in my favor. So your references are important. And the last one that I would say is your motivational letter / personal statement. Like that's your chance to shine. That's when you're going to have to convince, because you're selling an idea, you're selling you. You want someone to invest money in you. You want them to invest a lot of money on your scholarship, and they have to be bought in. And your personal letter is your chance to do that. So don't just rumble and say oh, poor me, help me. No, say, you know what? I'm good at what I do. I have done it before. I'm capable. I'm competent. So invest in me, and you're not going to regret it. So don't make it a party first, and don't try to cash in on people's sympathies. Just convince them that you are capable, you are competent, and you don't have to be arrogant and cocky to do that. Just do it from a place of confidence and competence, and you'll be fine. So I think in summary, get good grades, excel people. You can't go wrong with excellence. And also, don't put your eggs in one basket. Get as many acceptances as possible. It shows that you're competent. It shows that many people want you, and it shows that you are going to be able to do what you do. And your referees, they should be reputable, and they should believe in you. You don't want a half-hearted reference. You want a referee that says Petronella is capable. Tag her. And your personal statement, don't mushy it. It's your chance to sell a product that is you. Make use of it. I think that's all that I can say, David, for now. Thank you.
So I'm just going to move on to Eric. And Eric, the question that I have for you is, it's virtually impossible to land a PhD scholarship without a proposal. From your experience, what steps should one take to develop a cut above the rest research proposal? Of course, I do understand when I'm asking you this question that there are some scholarships that you don't need to have a proposal. Like an institution already has a proposal, but that's maybe, if we are to put it into percentages, that's maybe 10%, but the rest you need to come up with a proposal. So to ask you again, what are those things? What has been the experience? What are those things that you think are critical when developing a cut above the rest proposal?
Thank you, David. Thank you also for pointing out that, well, it all depends on, what you are looking at. Some institutions already have projects, and you can actually apply to join those projects. And again, you might need to, at the beginning of that, actually develop a proposal, because what they've got is just the project, some ideas, but you need to come and fix that up, so that you've got a plan which you need to carry out for a number of years and actually deliver on the outcomes and expectations. Generally, there are clear things you need to be able to pay attention to when you're thinking about making a PhD proposal. And of course, you've got to be clear what's the gap you want to actually bridge. And well, that entails a lot of background work in order to identify that specific gap. Most often, students would go in and think they are going to change the world, they are going to change, become an Einstein, or and that's what we go in from the start with. It's just a little contribution, some little thing, a little job in the ocean, a low hanging fruit. That's the perspective we as students, you need to go in mind when you start thinking about applying for a PhD. In my case, well, what happened was I had quite a long number of years thinking about what I wanted to do, from undergrad. My PhD is in the area of climate change, specifically climate change lawmaking. And it's been a series of, from undergrad breaks in my studies, and then working with the community, and actually identifying that specific gap that communities were not involved as much as possible in the processes, decision-making processes, the law-making processes on climate change. And so that was the gap. But you've got decisions being made at higher levels that do not consider these local communities. And so that was the message I was pitching in my PhD. And when I explored the literature, I actually identified that, well, there is a gap in the incorporation of communities' knowledge and practices in the process of decision-making on law and policy-making. And so that's how I coined my PhD proposal in terms of the gaps, and specifically pointing out the aims of that PhD. So you've got this clear structure where you've got a title, you've got the gaps you identify through literature or your background experience, how you tell that story, and also the specific aims of what your PhD wants to achieve. And then you've got one of the most crucial elements is the methodology. How are you going to carry out this PhD? What specific approach do you want to use? What specific philosophies and all of that do you want to apply? What theories, are you going to test a hypothesis? Are you going to be based on, some specific theoretical backgrounds to test that, to bring that within the scenario which you want to explore, and see if what others have done actually ties to what you're doing. So it all depends on the kind of studies you want to carry out. Of course, you need to be looking at, okay, what's the contribution you want to be making in this PhD. I talked about the low-hanging fruit. From the start, it's so ambitious. Sometimes when you get too ambitious, you actually wouldn't be a case which is marketable. The PhD scholarship committee doesn't see how you want to change the world, say, in 3 or 4 years. So one of the things is to have that in mind, be unique. Think about the little change, the little contribution you want to make. It's significant enough. What contribution do you want to make in terms of an addition to the body of knowledge that already exists? Sometimes you might be reinventing the wheel by trying to test and confirm what others have done. You might get a breakthrough with what you're doing, what you plan to do. And so the scholarship committee wants to see, how genuine you are in terms of what you want to do, whether you've gone through this thought process in my introduction, I said is thinking about the end in mind. Where do you want to arrive after 3, 4 years or 5 years? Where do you want to go? This piece of work you are doing, rather than having an ambitious project and saying you want to do it in 4 years, whereas the committee sees that this work can't be done within 4 or 5 years. So you need to be thinking that. Now, in summary, what I'm saying is, what the scholarship committees or proposal you want to get in, you need to go through this clear structure of, identifying what's the gap. That could be through a literature review or through a background experience based on what you've been doing, and then you identify a specific gap and what are the aims and objectives clearly defined, you want to achieve, you want to attain by engaging in this piece of work. What methodologies do you want to follow, clearly specified? And of course, what is the plan of action? Well, some scholarships, you would also need to specify, would the budget, the proposed budget actually tie with what you plan to do? You must have explored, what the offer says in terms of the funding, and actually tying that with the plan of action you've got in terms of the methodology, field work, for example. If you need to travel abroad, for example, to conduct field work, does that scholarship, is it able to cover up all of that, or you have alternative means of getting additional funding to cover up for that, so that at some point you don't say, well, I don't know what I'm going to do because I don't have the funding to pursue this work to the end. So you need to be thinking about all of that. So it's starting with the end in mind and going through these different processes and thinking about them, and knowing that, well, initially you think that you might change the world, but that already you become too ambitious. Sometimes what eliminates you, being unique and finding that little contribution you want to make in terms of an addition to the body of knowledge, is what actually gets you on top. Thank you. Yeah.
Lovely. That was really comprehensive. I think just taking from what you've just shared with us, that's enough to get started on writing a PhD proposal. Thank you so much for that. So I'm just going to move on to Lola. And the question that I received for Lola is this: one of the most critical things required when applying for a scholarship is a personal statement. Very critical. What, in your experience, makes a very good personal statement?
Yes, David. So one of the best pieces of advice that I've heard about writing a personal statement is that there are really two ways to go about it. You can write it from your head, or you can write it from your heart. So writing it from your head, and this is the option I took, it's really about highlighting your strengths, all the things that would make you a good candidate, all the things that you've done so far that might make your application compelling. For instance, I was coming straight out of undergrad towards my PhD program, and I'd spent the last few years taking on research, presenting at conferences, getting the good grades, as Petronella talked about. And, I thought that was what would make me a standout candidate. But over time, as I've read more personal statements, I think I would actually prefer going the latter route. That's writing from your heart. And that's really about talking about your passion, your journey so far, and why it's led you to that point. And I think taking this approach really sticks with your admissions officer because it makes you stand out from the pack. Most people who are applying to a PhD, as you are going to already have been among the top in their class. They perhaps already have research interest, perhaps research experience, but that doesn't say why they would do well or what makes them more attractive to a particular program. And writing from your heart is what does that, because it's what's really going to keep you going on, because we're all going to have those hard days. We're going to struggle with mental health. Many of us are people of color. We're perhaps going to struggle with imposter syndrome while in a PhD program. And it's that passion that's going to keep you going from those days. It's that passion that's going to get you through the long monotonic process of a PhD program. And it's also that passion, writing from your heart, that also matches better with the goals of that particular program. It tells them why you're not someone who's just an ideal PhD candidate for any program, but for that particular one. So I'd say write from your heart, and everything else will follow from that process. You'd still find a way to highlight your strengths, to highlight other things that you've done, but then it would give you a story that sticks more with the admissions officer. Another thing that I would say that's good to do with a personal statement is to use it as an opportunity to fill out weaknesses in your program, or I can say perceived weaknesses in your program. So in my case, for instance, I am an economist, and at the PhD level, it's very math heavy. So I had actually done my undergraduate in math, yet my GRE math score was not as high as, many economics PhD programs might need. And I use that chance then to highlight that I do have this math background. I do have these skills. I do have these courses that you'd require me to develop while I'm in your program. The issue is that I just don't like standardized tests. I've seen other people who might have had a semester or a year where they struggled academically, and that shows up in their transcript. And this is actually a very interesting way to tie in your passion for that field, because you can talk about, for instance, overcoming in that sense. You can talk about that impact of long suffering and perseverance that we talked about. It makes you a more human candidate, even to them, if you can highlight just that story of overcoming. So those would be my two pieces of advice, really, with writing a very compelling personal statement. Try to write about your heart, from your heart, because that will make you a more ideal fit for a particular program, and also use it to fill out perceived weaknesses in your program.
Right from the heart. Right from the heart. That's very important. Thank you so much, Lola. So I'm just going to move on to Cephas. Cephas, the question that I'm going to direct to you is, often people talk about the attractive. They talk about the beautiful, the social, the kind of social media things that people post, and they never tend to talk about the sacrifices that happens behind the scene. From your experience, what are these things, Cephas?
Thank you, David. I think, again, it all adds up to what everyone has been saying. It comes down to your personal statement. Firstly, I think one of the most overlooked things is that it is natural to start by disqualifying yourself whenever you are exposed to a competition. And if that happens, you tend to want to kind of look for ways to cheat the system. But it never works. Like, again, according to what Lola was saying, it's best to write from the heart.
Yeah.
One of the strengths of achieving that is to start by believing that you are actually unique, and your uniqueness can buy you whatever excellent opportunity that you stand before. I would say, in my experience, I did go through those behind the scenes, as you put it, very difficult times, where I also disqualified myself at first and thought I could, in a way, structure my personal statement in a way that would sell to be someone who deserves the scholarship. But then whenever I looked at the statement again, I would see that this is not adding up to one thing, because I'm trying to put together artificial things into the statement. But then one thing that I would say helps is to first believe in yourself. Then second is to have a clarity of purpose, like know what you want, where you want to go. And then third is to understand the basis of the scholarship selection criteria, like what are you applying into? If you can bring those three things to match, then you can align for the scholarship. Like you can put out the key points in your statement of purpose, and that makes you score high according to the whatever selection criteria or grading scale. Like for instance, particularly speaking about the Rhodes Scholarship, this is an international scholarship. So perhaps whoever is going to be on the selection panel is going to at first, they are going to try to reconcile a common standard assessment criteria worldwide, which is very difficult to achieve. So it all draws down to the basics, like they have to standardize these things by the basic selection criteria keynotes. So for instance, it is actually articulated in part of the documentation of the Rhodes Scholarship that they are looking for someone who has literary or scholastic attainments, someone who has the energy to exercise their talents, someone who has a care for social justice, a care for the weak, and someone who has shown a moral force of character with the instincts to lead. So you tend to see that they are actually grading your statement according to these points. But then, how can your story align to these points? Like, how can you tell your story so that it highlights these 4 points? That then becomes important. So first of all, believe in yourself, which is usually the major weakness that we tend to have, that we disqualify ourselves before we even start the process itself. Then after that, we try to put in an artificial personality. But if you believe in yourself, try to tell your story according to the selection criteria, it's according to the buying points, and you definitely score high. I think in my case, at least, that's what helped. But for me to be able to see or to recognize that I was having this challenge, it's often very difficult to see your own flaws when you are within them. So the way to understand your own flaws is to look at examples. For instance, in my case, I looked at many personal statements that were solely addressed for the Rhodes Scholarship. And I was seeing that they were different in themselves, but they tended to come in a specific format that was sounding differently from what mine was speaking out to. So reading out example personal statements that have been put together for the same application process, it tends to help you. And reading a lot around the scholarship itself, understanding where it comes from what's the purpose of the scholarship. Like, these scholarships are not just set out to be there, they are set out to achieve a purpose. Like the Rhodes Scholarship, if you look at it, it's there in Rhodes' view. Like it was a strategic scholarship meant to put together ties between British and its empire, and to build diplomatic ties between British and the USA. So like, if you tend to understand those, that speaks out to say, like, they're looking for someone who is more aligned into things like a political leadership or social, who stands for social justice. Like this, what I speak is specifically according to my experience of the scholarship.
Yeah,
I don't mean to say it's generalized. This is one particular example in my case. Thank you.
Sifas, just out of curiosity, was this your first scholarship? I understand you're on the Rhodes Scholarship. Was it your first scholarship that you applied for, and you applied and you got it the first time? Or there are a lot of scholarships that you had applied to, and you had heard a number of "we regret" hitting your inbox?
I did apply for so initially I was aiming for USA universities, and I was applying through the USAP. I applied to the USAP program. I applied directly to the universities. I had written SATs. I had a low score, but I didn't rewrite, and so I set for the second SAT. I had very high score for the subject SAT. That is the second. That was my second SAT. So I thought with the high score I could get into an Ivy League university or something, but then it never worked. But this was just after my A levels, and having failed this number of times. The thing is, what kept me going was because I had a clarity of purpose. I knew what I wanted, and I knew that to get it, I had to be in a top tier institution. I had to do a PhD in a quantitative discipline. So when I didn't achieve this through my application, I kept on looking outside to what other opportunities were there. Of course, I had a friend who also knew about my my ambitions, and hearing about these and these failures, he also helped in looking out for scholarships that were there out there. Eventually, he suggested that I apply into the Rhodes Scholarship. That's when I started looking into the Rhodes Scholarship.
Okay, great, Cephas. But just briefly, in less than a minute, you said you had applied for different other scholarships before, which you did not manage to get. How did you handle that? How did you deal with that? Because I think that's also a problem that many people faces, dealing with that rejection. How did you deal with it?
It's never easy to handle rejection, but honestly, I've been rejected quite a lot of times, and the first time I got a rejection, I felt like it was the end of the world, but it pushed me to strike again. But I was still in a competitive drive to try and achieve my failed attempt. I tried again, it bounced off again. I didn't get it. So after the second rejection, that's when I then became like acclimatized to rejection. I started knowing what things are asked in the scholarships. I started reformulating my applications, and that built-up process, like I think, it's a power to be able to handle rejection. I have been rejected in many disciplines, and I've questioned myself whether I am good enough, whether I'm too bad. Like it just brings all those type of questions to yourself. But then eventually you tend to see that with more rejections, you learn how to structure a powerful application that is modified in a way that properly fits into whatever you are applying.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Cephas. So I'm just gonna go to Petronella. So because we are now in the follow-ups and supplementary questions segment, so I'm just gonna go to Petronella. Petronella, you have been listening to what all these other panelists have been sharing, such touching, inspiring things they've been sharing. Is there anything that you would like to comment on?
I would say first and foremost, I've learned quite a lot of things. I think I might as well apply for another scholarship soon. But I think if I was going to say anything, I think I really liked Eric's points on proposals. And if I can add one thing to that, it would be that in some instances, it might work for you to get a supervisor at the institution you want to go, and they help you on the proposal, because sometimes you might come up with a brilliant proposal on your own, and then you will have a hard time finding a supervisor for it. So it will help sometimes going to the website of the school that you want to go to identify someone who works with that area, what they have done, and how the work has inspired you. Reach out to them and start working with them. So that way you build a rapport. When you then submit an application, you have someone in your corner, and you have someone who's going to work as a supervisor. That's all. And I think maybe quickly to what Lola said, like writing from the heart, I think it's so powerful because it sort of like brings the balance, like you are still human, but you're also very confident. And I think for me, it was quite, I remember when I got Oxford, they were like curious, oh, you grew up in Gokwe, you were this girl. So it's sort of like I humanized myself. So I'm very competent, but I'm also very a human being who is passionate about this. So that really helped. So I think those are my two quick comments. And other than that, I have learned a lot.
Petronella is an author. She wrote an inspiring book. What's the title of your book?
From Gokwe to Oxford, The Girl Who Dared to Dream.
The Girl Who Dared to Dream. You are indeed that girl. I'm just going to move on to Lola. You have heard what Cephas has said. You have heard what is being said by Petronella. Anything that came to your mind? Because as I was just listening to all of you guys, I'm being stirred up here. I'm just getting more inspired as well. And maybe just before I give Lola the time, the point that you just mentioned, Petronella, is very important. It's a thought that was coming to my mind as Cephas was talking. The idea of having someone to hold your hand. You see, this application journey is not easy on your own. And I'm telling you, it will be difficult. It will be difficult for you to achieve your goals and objectives by yourself. So you definitely need someone to hold your hand. And there's no one better positioned than the professor or whoever it is, a doctor, that you're looking at the perspective of being your supervisor, because that person is the one that has an appreciation of what you are trying to achieve. For example, if you're applying for a scholarship, maybe at an institution like Oxford, this is someone that is having an emic perspective. This is someone that is an inside perspective. They have a better appreciation of the institution, how they approach a discourse, how they approach a topic. You know, they will help you a lot. So it's really important. And I thought it was very important to also just highlight that. That's very critical. So I'm going to move on to Lola now. Lola, anything that is coming to your mind, anything?
Yes, thank you. Your previous comments are actually a perfect segue to what I was about to say, because, you know, I was very inspired here in Cepha's journey, and I think is very important to not give up on yourself, to be very determined when you have a particular goal, perhaps a particular institution, a particular program in mind. But I do think that sometimes it's more important for us to not be so hung up on the name or the ranking of a school, especially at the PhD level. I think it's also or perhaps in some cases, even more important to be sure that a program aligns with your interests, your journey, and your goals. And what I mean by that is that sometimes, you know, the best ranked school may not be the best for you as a person. You know, it might not have people who are working in the particular fields that you want to do. It might not have a climate that is conducive to your learning. Many of these in the US, for instance, are what we call cutthroat programs or weed out programs where, you know, they're trying to foster an environment where graduate students compete against each other and, you know, a few are weeded out after the first few years. I think it's very important to find a program that's going to be collaborative, have a collaborative spirit, because really these are marathons, they're not sprints, you know. And I was in that situation myself, applying to programs. You know, I had good grades. I still had that African child mentality that, like, oh, you know, you want to go to the top schools, you know, Harvard, Brown, Yale. And when I think about it now, you know, those programs didn't have the people or the particular focus groups that I really wanted to spend the rest of my life working on. You know, when I think about just the coursework that I've taken so far, the kinds of courses that I've struggled with most in graduate school are really the bulk of what I have been doing in those programs, and the courses that have inspired me the most, or the connections or the faculty members who've inspired me the most, were missing in those other programs. And so I think that in many cases, it can help your survival and it can help to keep your drive and your spirit going for the longer term if you try to align your interests to things other than just you know, the name or the ranking of a particular institution.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Lola. So now I'm going to give Eric the opportunity to come in now to reflect on what has been said by his fellow panelists. Eric has applied to a number of scholarships, and I'm not sure. Just give us an idea of the number of scholarships that you have applied to and you have actually succeeded on.
Well, I've applied to. Thank you. I mean, I've enjoyed all the discussions. It's a lot of learning for me. I'm always work in progress, I must say, like everyone else. But I've applied to so many scholarships, like SIPA says, and I mean, you need to build a thick skin. But I've won a number of scholarships as well, but it's come with lots and lots of failures. I'm building that thick skin. And one thing to remember is that each failure only helps you get closer to what you want. So each time you fail, the next time you're writing another application or another scholarship proposal, it gets better than the previous. So that's one lesson I had for myself. And so I've applied for lots and lots of them, but I mean, I won an Australian government scholarship and went to Australia. My PhD was sponsored by Global Challenges PhD scholarship at the University of Birmingham. I've won the Commonwealth Fellowship. I've won the Australian government fellowship. A couple of others. But of course, as I said, that has come with lots and lots of trial and failures, and using those failures as learning opportunities rather than seeing them as as failure for me, but rather as opportunities for learning and improving each application I make after the other. So one of the things I've picked from from the discussions, what Lola said is that spirit of being self-aware. I mean, knowing that our weaknesses and our strengths are valuable in this process. And so sometimes we want to show, be it the scholarship panel, the application, panel, that we are perfect, and we kind of ignore the weaknesses which we can actually demonstrate and show that and show how we are going to overcome those weaknesses, turning them into potential future strengths. So we need to think about that, be that self-aware to be able to point out areas of weaknesses and demonstrating how we will turn that in the future into potential strength. And that's one of the things I mentioned again about thinking with the end in mind. Letting the panel, different panels know, well, you've thought about this is what you plan to do in the future, so that they can actually tie those areas with the support they can give you in that process, rather than presenting yourself as a perfect, no error, no weakness, less candidate. So you need to think about that.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Eric. But before I let you go, I just have one question for you. So I think it was Petronella who brought out this point about blowing your horn. To what extent do you blow your horn? Is there Of course, yeah, you didn't say blow your horn per se, but you have to market yourself, remember, because this is an application. It's a very important application. So if there's anything good that you have done in your life, whether you have been involved in community service, public service, whether you've been involved in leadership processes or whatever it is, this is your opportunity to talk about it. So how then do you balance that? Is there a point where you overdo it, where you may appear like you're overdoing it? What has been your experience regarding that?
Well, I mean, I agree with you. It's blowing the horn. I mean, you need to tell the story. In order to stand out, you need to blow the horn. In my case, what I did was, I mean, I was truthful, whatever message I was passing, to the panel, in terms of my community engagements, the achievements, the leadership roles I had, in the past, and demonstrating that, with tangible products. For example, I had contributed to the publication of a book. When I went for the interview for the Australian government scholarship, I was flown from Cameroon to Ghana to do the interview, and I carried along all these products I had, in terms of, a poster I had developed in the community to advocate for the rights of people to access water, for example. I had a publication where I had done a chapter on governance issues, so I carried all of this. And so when I was talking to the panel and saying, well, this is what I've been doing, I could pick up the poster and unroll that and say, well, this is what I did. So I could demonstrate that, I could, and say the truth rather than being vague and saying, I was part of an advocacy team, and everybody can say that, but can you demonstrate that? Can you tell the story with demonstrations if you've got that opportunity? So it's a competition, and you want to demonstrate that you stand out, in the crowd, and so you need to blow that horn, as you say, in order to stand out. If you don't, I mean, others would certainly do that, and that's what the panel is looking out for. And it's good you mentioned about balancing, not overdoing it, I mean, doing it with, clear evidence that this is what I do, which is not disputable. But once it's clear that you're overdoing it without any clear demonstrations to prove that this is exactly what I'm talking, this is what you can see, you can verify it, you can have a copy. I actually gave a copy of my publication to one of the panelists who was quite interested to read that. And so those are the examples I used, and that won me my Australian government scholarship and a couple of other scholarships.
Okay, so just moving on to the next segment of our discussion, we're going to be we're now at the closing remarks segment. So the first person that I'm going to give the time to speak is Petronella. Petronella, what outstanding tips would you like to give someone watching right now who is really desperate to secure a scholarship?
David, I'm going to end this the way I started it. Never let your desperation be an excuse for mediocrity. So never be so desperate to a point that you submit substandard work. When I applied to Oxford, I took the biggest gamble of my life. I applied to one university for one scholarship and I got it.
Yeah.
Because I literally took months. I wrote my personal statement like I was submitting a journal article. I literally went through everything. I was thorough. So I would say this, no matter how desperate you are, breathe and actually produce a quality application. People will say, I'm not getting a scholarship, I'm not getting a scholarship. And you ask them for the papers that they're submitting and you were shocked. So it's literally just sending sending this to this university, this to the same substandard application. So I would say your desperation is not an excuse for mediocrity. Put in the work, do the pre-research application, know what they want clearly, who they're looking for, who is your potential supervisor, how can you get in touch with them, people we have gotten, what have they done. So I would rather you put all the work in making one application than divide the attention to 10 applications and never get anything. So my parting words are, have one good application instead of 10 bad ones.
That's really enlightening. Thank you so much for that. Over to you, Eric. What, in general terms, are the most critical documents needed before you commence scholarship applications? You would assume everyone knows, but I think it's just good that we just highlight that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a combination of your educational profile, your CV, and different things you put together. Of course, your statement of purpose and all of that. Those are the things which you need to put together, looking at the eligibility criteria for the particular scholarship. That will spell out all the documents which you need to put together. But of course, it's your educational profile, how you put that together on a succinct CV that speaks, and of course, how you put the experiences together on that piece of paper, how that makes you stand out. So it's putting all of this together and thinking about how you structure that and present that to the panel or your application package, which really counts. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Eric. I'm just going to move on to Lola. Lola, what advice would you like to give to someone looking for a US scholarship?
Yes, so I would say, and this is just tying in what other panelists have said, don't give up on yourself before you even get started. I've heard from a lot of people who reach out to me about wanting to apply to graduate school and are worried that they don't have that wealth of experience already coming in. Oh, they haven't done research, they haven't published, they haven't presented at conferences. But I try to remind them, and I really want to have this stick with all of you, that there's a story to be told from all your experiences. There's a way that all the things that you've been through up until that moment can tie into the skills that graduate schools are looking for. So, perhaps you've not published in a journal, but you had that class where you were required to do a capstone project or a research project. Those are the kinds of skills grad schools look at. Perhaps you haven't presented at a conference, but you've presented to other academics. If these are your professors, they're all also academics. You've been through that peer review process in another way by getting feedback from your classmates, from other people in that sense. So try to even just perhaps extracurricular activities, like some of these even use some of the skills that graduate schools are looking for. So try to tie in different experiences that might not fit as exactly as you might think to what graduate schools are looking for, but try to fit them into the broad goals in a sense. And, you will find a way. There are people I've met in programs who had no background in that program whatsoever coming in, and we're still able to tie their experiences in some way. So yes, don't give up on yourself before you get started, and best wishes, best of luck as you embark on this journey.
Thank you so much, Lola. So I'm just going to move on to Cephas. Cephas, what outstanding tips also from your experience would you like to give someone watching who's also desperate for a scholarship? Anything?
Thank you. And again, thanks to everyone. I also learned a lot from the discussion. I think just to give an overarching echo to what everyone has already mentioned, if you look at it in general, the application process, particularly to a graduate scholarship, stands out to be in two things that we can separate. Like there's the application to the scholarship itself, then the call to demonstrate that you know research itself.
Mhm.
For the part of the scholarship itself, I would say a tip is to again mentioning to
Mhm.
speaking back to Petronella's note of selling out yourself.
Mhm.
I think there are things that you like. It's a dilemma. There are things that you do that you would think is just your natural self, and it's not a selling point.
Mhm.
Whereas it could be a selling point in the application. So I think what's important is to objectively pull yourself away from yourself and
Mhm.
uh, study yourself and look into what could be a selling point. Like it happened in my case. Like there were things that I did that I thought I should never mention. They were good deeds, but I thought like it was
Yep.
immoral to talk about them. Like
Mhm.
I did them out of kind heart, so like I shouldn't benefit from those good things. Like,
Mhm.
when you're benefiting from your good deeds, then you tend to ask yourself, like, did I do it to benefit? But like, it's all about integrity. Like, it then speaks back to your integrity. But like, of course, you can talk about it. It's not wrong to talk about what things you have done. Like, that's yourself. You are calling out to describe it. So that's for the scholarship. But then if you are applying into a graduate school, it's not about your good deeds only. It also calls to demonstration of your capabilities or your competence when it comes to research. Uh, like the same aspect that Eric mentioned, like demonstrate that you know that you have
Mhm.
to give a question that has not been researched before. You have to uh, make it sit within the literature, like show that what others have done in history, in the literature, like how does it connect to your problem? Like where is the gap in the literature? Like they did this, but why is your question important and why wasn't it addressed? Then demonstrate that you also have a propose a methodology to show that you know how to address this question. Like it's not been done because it's not doable, but you are coming up with a unique direction of approaching into that thing. Then uh, since you are proposing a methodology, it then calls you to demonstrate that you have the the, the appropriate background to allow you to be able to do that scientific study, if it's within a scientific discipline, like, or if it's non-scientific, you have to demonstrate that you are able to gather the new knowledge, like you have the capability, and that calls also to speak about the courses you studied, like not everyone knows what you studied. Initially, everyone has a perception of what you know, but they may think you don't know anything. So, like, speak out about the basic things, like the courses you did, how you think they will add to the methodology that you are looking forward to use to contribute new knowledge in your research. Those two aspects like tend to be separated, but like you have to find a way to speak them out and to know exactly when it is relevant to showcase those aspects.
Great. Thank you so much, Sifas. So, in other words, in order for you to blow the horn, as it were, you must have been involved or actively participating in a number of things. Um, Maybe it also becomes a point to say that maybe you are still in high school, or maybe you're just starting your first year, maybe in your local country. I think it also becomes a very important point to note that you must be involved, because those are the things that will enrich your story. You must be involved, be in the debate, whatever, debate club, be involved, write articles. Just find a way of being engaged. And at the end of the day, you will have yourself to thank for all of that. Viewers and listeners, thank you so much. It has been indeed a great pleasure and having all these panelists and having this Indaba. This marks the end of our Indaba. Thank you very much again, panelists, for taking time. This was really a lively, encouraging, inspiring Indaba. Thank you, viewers and listeners, for joining us. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel. Also remember to visit our website, www.globalsouthopportunities.com, for global opportunities, including scholarships, fellowships, jobs, internships, grants, funding. It is bye-bye for now. Thank you.